Mohammed Othman was 9 years old when the first Intifada uprising broke out in Palestine on December 8, 1987. He remembers moving rocks onto the roads to block Israel Defense Forces IDF from entering his home village of Jayyous in the West Bank. He and others would keep off the roads leading into the village and shout out to the older kids if they saw soldiers approaching. Othman remembers being given fabric to sew the Palestinian flag, an act that could carry a 5-year jail sentence, as well as masks to cover their faces. Read more. Intifada is what you need to know. Like thousands of Palestinian youths, Othman's young age didn't stop him from doing his part in the Palestinian uprising against Israeli occupation and aggression. What first started in the Gaza Strip's Jabalia refugee camp, as a reaction to an IDF truck hitting a civilian car killing 4 Palestinians, quickly spread to an uprising across the whole of Gaza and the West Bank lasting nearly 6 years. The uprising finally brought the Palestinian struggle into view for the world and created a lasting image of Palestinian youth throwing stones at Israeli forces wielding guns. The internet as a tool to support traditional strategies. Khalil Yusuf, arrested 7 times even before the first Intifada, vows to continue his resistance. It is widely believed that young people led the first Intifada. Balad, a refugee camp resident, Khalil Yusuf was 18 in the first Intifada. The 80s generation was the base generation for the Intifada, Yusuf told DW. Yusuf also remembers the main form of resistance used was blocking streets and throwing stones. 30 years and 1 generation on, this symbol and strategy of resistance can still be seen throughout Palestine. 15-year-old Mohammed Abu Jayyous of Balad, a refugee camp near Nablus, West Bank, said he will always throw stones and Molotov cocktails at Israeli soldiers if they enter the camp. Though now, he adds, there are more peaceful ways of resisting the occupation. Using social websites like Facebook, we can publish images, poetry and essays, Abu Jayyous said. Nabi Saleh is one of the most active villages in the West Bank, infamous for its weekly Friday protests. Having participated in the first Intifada and remaining a time activist until today, Minal Tamimi is one of the main organizers of the village protests and agrees with the importance of social media. It forces the world to look at you and tell them what our resistance means and why, Tamimi said. Minal Tamimi is proud of her resistance to Israel. Life experience fuels resistance. Jana Ayad of Nabi Saleh was 4 years old when she saw her friend Mustafa shot and killed by the IDF. Now 11, this loss, as well as the death of her uncle and arrest of many family members, are her personal motivations for resisting the occupation. I can't just stay calm as if nothing is happening. I have to do something to make the whole thing change, turn it upside down and live like any child in the world, Ayad told DW. This extremely vibrant young girl is now reportedly the world's youngest journalist, going under the name of Jana Jihad. Ayad documents everything in her world affected by the occupation and uploads it to her social media sites, including her Facebook account, which boasts 250,000 likes. Experiences like Ayad's resonate through all Palestinian youth and push them to resist. Othman remembers how the first Intifada formed his impressions of Palestine and the occupation. There were evening meetings, where everyone in the neighborhood came and spoke in the streets. And Palestinian Liberation Organization PLO activists would hand out leaflets, teaching us, Othman said, as the midday call to prayer drifted through his living room. Abu Jayyous believes nowadays that families provide the main source of education. Every family has someone who is a prisoner or martyr, Abu Jayyous said. Ayad had her friend killed by Israeli forces and also witnessed the death of her uncle. Political affiliation versus independent uprising. Othman believes the division of political parties is detrimental to Palestinian solidarity and therefore the resistance. In 2007, Hamas took control of Gaza and split from the Palestinian Authority led by Fatah in the West Bank. Now the kids are more concerned about supporting Hamas and Fatah, not about Palestine, Othman lamented. Fatah Youth Movement Secretary General and Revolutionary Council member Hassan Faraj believes political work is very important for diplomacy. Through politics we can work with parties around the world to support us and also strengthen our people within Palestine, he told DW. Read more. What are Fatah and Hamas? While thousands of Palestinian youth still organize themselves under political parties and popular resistance committees, many also believe this takes away from the personal aim of resistance. I want everyone to just be united as Palestinians, not in the name of Fatah or Hamas, Ayad said. Resistance itself is a personal issue. I am not waiting for someone to tell me what to do. I will resist by myself, concurs Abu Jayyous. The time has come. Even so, if there was to be a third intifada today sparked by U.S. President Donald Trump's decision on Jerusalem, Abu Jayyous sees the first step as being a spontaneous uprising among Palestinians, but after that it should be organized by political committees. Bushra Tamimi of Nabi Saleh was 16 years old in the first intifada. It should be time for a third intifada, she told DW. Bushra said it comes in waves. They rise, they calm down, then they rise up. We're just waiting for the motive, she explained. Donald Trump may very well have provided that motive. United Nations Security Council Resolution 242, passed on November 22, 1967, called for the exchange of land for peace. Since then, many of the attempts to establish peace in the region have referred to 242. The resolution was written in accordance with Chapter 6 of the UN Charter, under which resolutions are recommendations, not orders. A coalition of Arab states, led by Egypt and Syria, fought Israel in the Yom Kippur or October War in October 1973. The conflict eventually led to the secret peace talks that yielded two agreements after 12 days. This picture from March 26, 1979, shows Egyptian President Anwar Sadat, his U.S. counterpart Jimmy Carter and Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin after signing the accords in Washington. The U.S. and the former Soviet Union came together to organize a conference in the Spanish capital city of Madrid. The discussions involved Israel, Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, and Palestinians, not from the Palestinian Liberation Organization (PLO), who met with Israeli negotiators for the first time. While the conference achieved little, it did create the framework for later, more productive talks. The negotiations in Norway between Israel and the PLO, the first direct meeting between the two parties, resulted in the Oslo I Accord. The agreement was signed in the U.S. in September 1993. It demanded that Israeli troops withdraw from West Bank and Gaza and a self-governing, interim Palestinian Authority be set up for a 5-year transitional period. A second accord was signed in 1995. U.S. President Bill Clinton invited Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak and PLO Chairman Yasser Arafat to the retreat in July 2000 to discuss borders, security, settlements, refugees and Jerusalem. Despite the negotiations being more detailed than ever before, no agreement was concluded. The failure to reach a consensus at Camp David was followed by renewed Palestinian uprising, the Second Intifada. The Camp David negotiations were followed first by meetings in Washington and then in Cairo and Taba, Egypt, all without results. Later the Arab League proposed the Arab Peace Initiative in Beirut in March 2002. The plan called on Israel to withdraw to pre-1967 borders so that a Palestinian state could be set up in the West Bank and Gaza. In return, Arab countries would agree to recognize Israel. The U.S., EU, Russia and the UN worked together as the Middle East Quartet to develop a roadmap to peace. While Palestinian Prime Minister Mahmoud Abbas accepted the text, his Israeli counterpart Ariel Sharon had more reservations with the wording. The timetable called for a final agreement on a two-state solution to be reached in 2005. Unfortunately, it was never implemented. In 2007, U.S. President George W. Bush hosted a conference in Annapolis, Maryland, to relaunch the peace process. Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert and Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas took part in talks with officials from the quartet and over a dozen Arab states. It was agreed that further negotiations would be held with the goal of reaching a peace deal by the end of 2008. In 2010, U.S. Middle East envoy George Mitchell convinced Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to agree to and implement a 10-month moratorium on settlements in disputed territories. Later, Netanyahu and Abbas agreed to relaunch direct negotiations to resolve all issues. Negotiations began in Washington in September 2010, but within weeks there was a deadlock. A new round of violence broke out in and around Gaza late 2012. A ceasefire was reached between Israel and those in power in the Gaza Strip, which held until June 2014. The kidnapping and murder of 3 Israeli teenagers in June 2014 resulted in renewed violence and eventually led to the Israeli military Operation Protective Edge. It ended with a ceasefire on August 26, 2014. Envoys from over 70 countries gathered in Paris, France, to discuss the conflict between Israelis and Palestinians. Netanyahu slammed the discussions as rigged against his country. Neither Israeli nor Palestinian representatives attended the summit. A two-state solution is the only possible one, French Foreign Minister Jean-Marc Ayrault said at the opening of the event. Despite the year's optimistic opening, 2017 brought further stagnation in the Israelo-Palestinian peace process. A deadly summer attack on Israeli police at the Temple Mount, a site holy to both Jews and Muslims, sparked deadly clashes. Then U.S. President Donald Trump's plan to move the embassy to Jerusalem prompted Palestinian leader Abbas to say the measures undermine all peace efforts. Author Assam Salim